I'm about to show you 10 different mechanical creations that I've made with Clockwork, which is an add-on for Create Mod in Valkyrien Skies. I'll be showing you this pick and place mechanism, a differential gear, a two-legged walking mechanism, and more. First, let's have a look at this universal joint. Okay, so this thing lets you transmit rotation at an angle. So here I have my rotation source at the bottom, and it's going into the red segment. And then there's this yellow thing in the middle, and that's connected to this blue shaft right here. So this lets you transmit the power at an angle all the way up there. It's just a passive bearing at the top, so nothing's really happening, but you could connect that to something and transmit your power diagonally, which is really neat. So if we look at it like this, it only looks like the yellow part is going back and forth, so that's kind of weird. Like, here, let's try to go here. And it's just rocking back and forth, but somehow it's transmitting the power. It makes a lot more sense when we go back here and we look at it, and it is rotating, right? So from this frame of reference, the yellow part is rotating, and that's what's sending the force down the blue segment, all right? So that's how it's able to transmit the power. Oh, and there's these levers here that you can control, so you can change the direction, you can start and stop it, and you know, it's just kind of cool to watch it react to your inputs. You can change the speed too. We can go all the way up. You know, we can we can go a little bit crazy. I mean, that's a bit too fast, but it works. That's pretty neat. It's not breaking or lagging out or anything, so that's pretty solid. So the next build is the rack and pinion. So if you have a car and it has a steering wheel, you're gonna have probably a rack and pinion system controlling it. So basically you have a star shape here, and there's two bearings, and there's two overlapping structures. So this one is kind of uses the fact that you can overlap things in Valkyrien Skies, at least for now. And I'll show you it in action, and so it works fairly well. I mean, it works. It does the job, but it slips a little bit, as you can see, and kind of has a bit of trouble. But at the end of the day, it's going to be able to make your pinion, or rather, I guess the rack part, move back and forth. So using this, you are able to get some sort of linear motion from a rotational source, which is really cool. That's what the rack and pinion lets you do. It lets you convert rotation into linear motion. So this is the type 2, and already you can see there's something pretty neat happening. So you have these bearings here, and on it there's just single blocks, and that allows it to mesh very well. It actually meshes perfectly, which is really surprising because, I mean, we're in Minecraft. This is a game with blocks. How do squares mesh together? Well, using the bearings. So I'm going to show you. So I'm going to turn this off, flick this lever here, and we're going to see it go, and it meshes perfectly. This lets you have a reliable rack and pinion system. It allows you to reliably move something back and forth linearly from a rotational source. Alright, so now for the third mechanism. This is the pick and place. So right here I have a controller. So basically I can just press spacebar, and I'm going to try and grab it and put it up there in the receptacle. So I'm going to try to time it just right and grab the diamond block and put it up there. Okay, no. I gotta hold spacebar. Let's try this. Okay, and there we go. Actually, that was easier than expected. I tried this a few times earlier, and it took me a few tries, but I got lucky this time. So there you go. It's pretty neat. It's a lot of fun. And then you can just grab it with the Gravitron, put it back. So if you want to try this out for yourself, I will be making all the mechanisms here available as a world download on my Patreon. So if you're interested, it's available there. Okay, so the next mechanism is the pantograph. So what's a pantograph? Well, you might have a mirror at home in your bathroom that extends from the wall. That uses a pantograph. You might see a scissor lift in a factory or on the street doing repairs or work. That uses a pantograph. And it's also used on trains to connect to the electrical wires above them. So let's see how this works. This will basically extend out. So if I flick this lever, you'll see right away it's extending. So what's happening is there's this input right here. So you have this bearing going into the red segment, and that's just kind of forcing everything to move along. And what's controlling it, what's keeping it restrained, is this right here. So you have the blue segment that has this piece of ice that's connected to, not connected to, it's sliding along a pole of ice. And why did I choose ice? Well, that reduces friction, because in Valkyrien Skies there's now friction. So if I put something that wasn't ice, it would have a slightly harder time to move. It would still work, but it might kind of jam and get stuck and maybe slow down. Our next mechanism is the Trammel of Archimedes. So what is this thing? I mean, it looks like a thing that's just spinning around aimlessly. I mean, it's got two bearings and it's kind of going along in these grooves. What it does is it's actually a machine for tracing out the shape of an ellipse. So we're gonna go into nighttime, and we're gonna watch the light at the end, and we're gonna see it trace the shape of an ellipse. It's not all shaders that do this. I'm using Kappa right now, and Kappa will have this kind of effect that lets you see the outline of the ellipse. So that's the point of the Trammel of Archimedes. Oh, and by the way, one of the reasons why I included the Trammel of Archimedes is it's actually a nod to the spiritual predecessor of Valkyrien Skies, which was Archimedes' ships, which I remember playing all the way back in Minecraft 1.2.5. We've sure come a long way since then. This next mechanism is the Chebyshev Lambda linkage. I've made videos on it before where I show how it's built, and I also show how you can build the somewhat impractical plantigrade walking machine. So this mechanism was built by a Russian mathematician named Chebyshev in the 1800s. And what's peculiar about it is that for a long part of its cycle, it goes in a straight line. So this is a mechanism that allows you to go in a straight line, and you can see how this motion might be useful for something that's walking. Moving on, we have the Schmidt coupling. So this was actually invented for NASA in the 1960s, and what it allows us to do is it allows us to translate rotational movement to a destination that's moving. So if I flick this lever, we can actually move this over to the right, and you can see that the rotation follows. So how I've done this is I've actually set up a rack and pinion system like the one I showed you earlier down here. So we can move this back and forth all we want, and it'll still send the rotation towards the destination. Alright, so the next mechanism is a trebuchet. A trebuchet is much superior to catapults, and what sets a trebuchet apart from a catapult is that it uses a weight to power itself, and that it uses a sling to shoot its projectile. I've approximated a rope using these bearings and some wool, so it's not perfect, but it does the job. Alright, so let's set this thing up. So I'm going to grab a projectile, take some stone right here, and I'll put it in here. I'll grab this controller here, and we just press spacebar, and that's gonna fire it. So let's have a look. Alright, let's follow that projectile and see how far it goes. Look how far it is. Whoa. Alright, so this one didn't actually make it that far. It went more up than it went forwards, but it still went about 80 blocks. So the trebuchet isn't entirely reliable, but let's set it up to fire again. So to do that, I'm just going to press spacebar again, and it's going to reset itself. I'll have to pull this part out because it gets all clumped up. Let's try this piece of wool. Let's see if we have a different result. Alright, let's fire this. Alright, so there's our projectile. It stopped moving because it moved into an unloaded chunk, but as we move closer, it's going to continue flying. There we go. Alright, so that actually made it about 220 blocks. So that's pretty powerful, that's pretty cool. Alright, let's go back. Alright, let's reset the trebuchet and try one more time. I'll reset this, and let's grab a piece of netherite. Alright, there we go. And I'll press spacebar to fire. Alright, that one launched a little early. I don't think I have... Oh. That was a failure. Okay, let's try again. Let's try again. I think the wool did best. Let's try the wool again. I think we have the best results with the wool, maybe because it's lighter. But this is also somewhat unpredictable. Wait, did it go backwards? What? How? How did it go backwards? Oh man, okay, it's clear that this trebuchet needs a bit of work. Clear that this is my first attempt at a trebuchet. Maybe I'll make a second trebuchet and try to improve on the design. Alright, so I still have two more mechanisms to show you. This next one is a differential gear. So you can find differential gears in gas-powered cars, and what they do is they let each wheel turn at a different speed. So that means that while you're taking a turn, your wheels will not skid. So here we have the input, and it's meshed to this big gear right here. It's not a perfect mesh because it uses cubes, and I mean cubes were never meant to mesh together properly. But this works, and it illustrates the concept of how a differential gear works. So because it's imperfect, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to put a creative motor here. And what that's going to do is it's just going to have a smoother operation. But it works even without this little cheat. And what it'll do is it'll be easier to show you how it works. So I've divided this into two parts. The brass part is the input and the andesite parts are the output. So the big brass gear actually has two smaller gears connected to it, and they're meshed with the output andesite gears. So you'll notice that both of the smaller input gears are not turning, but they are meshed with the andesite gears. So they're not turning because equal torque is being transmitted to each wheel. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna block one of the output wheels and we're gonna see what happens. So I'm gonna flick this lever right here and that will block this wheel on the right. So we can see that the wheel on the right is no longer spinning, yet the wheel on the left continues to spin. Now we'll notice that the brass gears are turning, and that's what allows torque to be sent to the left wheel while the right wheel has stopped. So if we go ahead and unblock the right wheel, we'll see that both sides begin spinning again and the brass input gears have stopped spinning. And the same thing happens if we block the other wheel. Now the right wheel continues to turn and the brass input gears are spinning. And of course it's cubes, so it's not a perfect mesh, but it's good enough to do the job. Okay, so our last mechanism is a bipedal walking mechanism. What does that mean? Well, it's a leg that we can use to build a robot or a mech or whatever we want. So this is actually built off of a toy. So this is a toy robot that I saw and I said, hey, I can make something Valkyrien Skies with this, and I did. So I looked at the toy and I looked at how it was working and I came up with this design here. Alright, so let's have a look at the mechanism. Basically, you just have this output that's connected to the leg, and then the leg just slides up and down along this shaft right here. And that's all it is. Okay, so here's the walking machine. So it's this stubby little thing, I don't care, it works. It's the first walking machine that I've ever made in Valkyrien Skies that has two legs and works. So I'm happy with the result. If I flick this lever here, we're gonna start moving, so let's go. So this thing's a little jerky, but guess what? It can navigate terrain. It can go over this ledge, no problem. So, as far as I know, this is the first two-legged walking machine made in Valkyrien Skies that does not use some sort of force to pull it upwards. So this works entirely with the legs. There's no propellers or anything keeping it upward. I'm happy with the result. Even though it's a little bit, it's not great. I mean, look, it's jerky and everything, but it's walking. I mean, this is walking. I mean, okay, it's kind of hopping right now. It's more like a kangaroo than an actual walking machine. It's actually kind of terrible. I don't know. It's what's it doing now? What was that? I'm happy with it because this is kind of like this is my creation. I'm happy with it. It just hops around. So I'll show you a bit of the controls. So there's this lever here, that's the master on off, but I can stop one of the legs, and what that's going to do is we're going to turn around in a circle. Only this leg is going to move, and eventually we will turn around. But to turn around faster, I can flick this lever to reverse the direction of the other leg. So this is actually the fastest way to turn around. So it's kind of like a tank steering. When people walk, we don't walk like this. We have hip flexors that turn one of our legs into a different direction. Maybe I'll try to make a walker like that someday, and that'll be a more realistic walking machine. But for now, this is the best we have. This is the best I've done. I don't know if anything else exists out there. Let me know. Let's go back in here and flick that lever. And you know what? Let's just go out and watch it walk a little bit. It's really hopping. I don't know, it's a hopper walker. It looks like, I don't know. It doesn't really know what it's doing. It's just trying to move. So I could have linked both legs together, and I could have offset them by 180 degrees, and that probably would have given me a more, what is it doing? That probably would have given me a more stable way of walking, but I wouldn't have been able to turn. And I really wanted to be able to turn because, like, what's the point of a walking machine that doesn't turn? Like, come on. It's got to be able to turn, otherwise you can't go anywhere except the straight line. And you know what goes in straight lines? Those little piston and, you know those vanilla flying machines? Those go in a straight line, and those are boring. This is fun. Like, I wanted to make things that moved. Vanilla Minecraft only has those piston things that they go in one direction. Who cares, you know? But this, Valkyrien Skies Clockwork, create mod, it lets you do things that you can't do in vanilla Minecraft, even if it's just this weird hobbly walking machine. That's I mean this is barely a walking no, this is a walking machine. It's like a child. It's like a toddler that doesn't know how to walk. I mean, it doesn't have a mind, but it's just the mechanisms, and I'm sure I'll be able to improve on this. I hope I'll be able to improve on this one day, but for now, this is what we have. I mean, we're so lucky to have create mod, Valkyrien Skies, and Clockwork. Without that, none of this would be possible. So huge thanks to the developers and the community around these mods. They really make it possible to do some cool things. Let me know in the comments which build is your favorite and if you'd like to know more about any of them. If you want to play around with any of these builds or take a closer look, everything you see here will be available as a world download on my Patreon. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.